Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Natasha Kirchek, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel sees the lowest rate in new coronavirus infections since March. We'll reveal a new Israeli filtration device that can kill up to 99% of viruses in the air. And we'll meet an amazing teen that's dropped out of high school to produce one of the most watched films of the year. Now, this is one way to start the day. Magen David Adom's emergency 24/7 coronavirus hotline is officially closing today because of the reduced number of calls. Those concerned can still call MDA's regular 101 hotline, but the infection rate is luckily continuing to go down here in Israel. In fact, 16,193 Israelis and counting have now been diagnosed with the coronavirus, just over 40 new cases within the last 24 hours, which is great news because it's the lowest increase of infections since March. The death toll sadly has risen to 230 people, and as we speak, 103 patients are in severe condition, 82 of which are on a ventilator. But almost 10,000 Israelis have now recovered, and the Israeli cabinet is meeting today to discuss easing regulations even further. Starting just last night, those over the age of 67 are now no longer barred from going back to work. Officials are considering eliminating the restriction that forces Israelis to stay within 100 meters of their homes unless they're going out for essential purposes like buying food, medicine, or seeking medical care. And the health ministry is reportedly set to recommend an immediate end to the ban on visits to second-degree relatives, including grandparents, and allow for gatherings of up to 10 people. Now, other actions being considered would be allowing more guests to attend weddings and funerals and permitting universities to hold classes in groups of up to 15 people. The finance ministry has allegedly drawn up a 4-step plan for reopening the economy. In the first step, malls and outdoor markets would reportedly reopen on May 17th, and Palestinian workers from the West Bank would be allowed to return to construction jobs in Israel. The second stage would allow for group classes, community centers, nature preserves, and museums to open up again, and for non-medical health treatments like physiotherapy to be given. The third step would be to reopen movie theaters, theaters for plays, essential flights, fitness centers, auditoriums, restaurants, and bars. And it's believed that diners will be able to eat on-site in restaurants starting on June 15th. And finally, last but not least, of course, nightclubs, swimming pools, water parks, and amusement parks would be open to the public. This outline, of course, is still under discussion, and it doesn't include any specific dates. So for now, locals can just keep on dreaming, including myself. All right, now thousands of self-employed Israelis and small business owners are taking to the streets. It's all to demand that the Israeli government provide them with more support amid the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus.
We need the government to provide us with a little bit of money so we can start the business again. And the government doesn't want to do that. This is why we are here today.
Protesters are demanding 100% compensation and blasting the government for failing to provide unemployment benefits for the self-employed. So far, Israel's granted the self-employed a 6,000 shekel payment to help weather the pandemic, and has approved a plan last week to include a second stipend equaling 70% of their regular income, up to a maximum amount of 10,500 shekels. But the stipends are taking time to reach the bank accounts of many who are living paycheck to paycheck. And so far, out of the 80 billion shekel government package to support the economy, only 4.6 billion has gone to small businesses, with only 14,500 applications out of almost 50,000 being approved. Small business owners say that most of the funds are going to larger companies which can more easily secure loans from banks. Right now, the unemployment rate in Israel is at 27%, with over 1.2 million out of work. And the National Employment Service says that women are taking more of a hit. The number of Israeli women left unemployed by the coronavirus crisis is 28% higher than men. And the United Nations is even saying that the pandemic is exacerbating inequalities between men and women globally. Sadly, though, economists believe it will take a year or more for Israel's economy to recover from this crisis. Now, for some, a free stay at an Israeli hotel is like a dream come true, but for many Israelis who have been stuck in so-called coronavirus hotels for weeks of mandatory quarantine, vacation is quickly turning into prison. Well, some government officials are now calling for a new solution to be found, saying that residents' mental and even physical health is at stake. And ILTV's Nittany Manson has the story.
For weeks, Israelis returning from abroad have been forced to enter mandatory quarantine in various hotels around the country. And according to many reports, life inside these hotels is made as bearable as possible, with group exercise programs, film screenings, and more amongst the infected. But a darker side to these hotels has reared its head, after several suicide attempts have been recorded. Now, details surrounding these attempts have not been released, but Israeli Channel 12 reports many occupants at hotels complaining of being forced into solitary confinement within their rooms, leading to severe psychological issues. The National Security Council and members of the Homefront Command, the Finance Ministry, and the Welfare Ministry have since convened to discuss the issue then, with many representatives calling on the government to find another way and close these hotels, in part because of the psychological damages involved, but also with respect to cost. Maintaining these facilities is costing the state $57 million per month, and there's no end to the virus in sight. Until recently, most Israeli new arrivals in the country were allowed to quarantine at home. The National Security Council has rejected the closures at this time.
Well, now for some good news around the pandemic, the Israeli Asuta Medical Center in Ashdod has now shuttered its coronavirus department because the hospital has no more active patients. Over the last 8 weeks, the hospital has treated dozens of coronavirus patients, including some of the country's youngest, and a handful of very serious cases. But now Asuta is the first hospital to announce that they're COVID-free. And joining us with more is Dr. Deborah Gershov-West. Now, you're the director of the emergency department at the Samson Asuta Ashdod University Hospital. How many corona patients has the hospital treated so far, and has everyone recovered?
We've treated so far 75 patients, and yes, everybody's recovered except for one patient who died early on in the process around March, an elderly patient with a lot of comorbidity. All the other patients have recovered, including some seriously ill patients, and as you mentioned, some of the youngest patients in the country who to be so seriously ill.
Now, despite the happy news that obviously the coronavirus ward is closing down, many predict that a second wave is coming. Do you agree with these predictions? What do you think about the plans to ease restrictions at this time?
I think that we absolutely have to be ready for a second wave. I think it's very likely, especially since the restrictions have been lifted. However, I think we're ready for it. I think that what these the last few months actually proved to us was that we can handle a certain number of very sick patients, both in Asuta and in the country countrywide. And as long as that we maintain the virus to an extent, and we keep the very sick, the very vulnerable patients, we keep them out of danger, then it's actually a disease we can deal with, like the flu. I mean, over the winter months, there's a lot of flu, and we don't shut down the hospitals or shut down the country. We just manage it. So I think we will see more patients, but I think it's something we should be able to manage.
Having dealt with this virus firsthand, do you feel that all the regulations that were put into place were necessary, the way that Israel went about dealing with this crisis?
Absolutely. I think the results speak for themselves. We anticipated a much greater crisis, with much greater mortality and morbidity, and we didn't see it. We saw the numbers. We shouldn't really be all that different to the countries around us, and we are. I think the very rapid and very strict response, right from the beginning, has proven itself. I think we saw numbers that were much less than we expected. We still saw seriously ill patients, but it was something that the hospitals could absorb. We didn't have patients, God forbid, dying because we didn't have ventilators to treat them or staff to manage them.
Right. Now, earlier this month, your hospital was selected to participate in the first Israeli clinical trial for a drug called Colorizing as a COVID-19 treatment. Can you tell us about it a bit?
So from we basically used it on most of the patients, along with Plaquenil, which is another drug that initially was considered to be a life-saving miracle drug. Didn't see a significant change in the patient care. It's a little bit hard to tell because the numbers are small. And what everybody's producing, what we're seeing from all of these trials that come out, are very, very small numbers that in any other time will not really stand up to any scientific tests. We didn't see any great response. What we did see a response with was the plasma. When we took plasma from patients, patients that are recovered, we used them on 2 of our sickest patients and actually did see quite an impressive response, quite an impressive recovery. We don't know whether it's cause and effect because, again, the numbers are too small, but it was quite promising.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. The work that you have been doing is just so important. And again, we're happy that for now the coronavirus ward is closing down at your hospital. We'll see, I guess, how this plays out. But again, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you.
Now, in a landmark decision on Thursday, the chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court has ruled that in her eyes, Palestine is a state, and as a result, the court now has the jurisdiction to investigate allegations of war crimes filed against Israel. As you might assume, the Israeli government is fuming, and ILTV's Aaron Porras has the details.
In a 60-page-long ruling, Chief Prosecutor at the ICC, Fatou Bensouda, is defending her position that Palestine is a state under the jurisdiction of the ICC. And as such, the International Criminal Court at The Hague has the authority to hear cases of alleged war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity filed by the PA against Israel. This is regardless of the fact that Israel is not a signatory to the ICC, by the way. Well, the PA is, of course, lauding the decision as a step towards a war crimes trial, while Israeli authorities are incensed. Israeli Energy Minister Yuval Steinitz, for example, who leads the government's handling of this case, even says that he's forced to conclude that Bensouda is just espousing her typical anti-Israel stance as influenced by the BDS movement. Meanwhile, no other individual state supports the decision either, including those that formally recognize the state of Palestine along the pre-1967 lines. Only the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation approves of Bensouda's position. All that said, Bensouda adds that she's not saying Palestine is a state per se, only that it does have a right to submit itself to the ICC's jurisdiction as a non-member observer. And now all that's left standing between Israel and a war crimes investigation is the 3 other ICC pre-trial chamber judges. Bensouda's position as chief prosecutor, however, is highly influential, and a final decision is expected within 120 days.
Now, the big question, is the new unity government legitimate or not? The High Court of Justice has begun deliberating this question live and is expected to decide within a few days. But here now to discuss is the chairman of Israel Media Watch, Ziv Maor. So the High Court suggested that Netanyahu would not be allowed to take on any additional ministerial portfolios besides being prime minister as long as he faces his trials. Also, they suggested he should be walled off from any involvement in appointing law enforcement officials. What is your take on that?
The very deliberation is basically illegal. The Supreme Court of Israel is not mandated by law to have this discussion. This appeal should have been denied on the threshold without even being deliberated. In accordance to that, the various decisions that the court is currently considering are, by definition, all illegal. There is law in Israel. This law basically authorizes the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, to assemble a government and to show its trust with this government. And once such a decision has been made, the court has no jurisdiction whatsoever. Now, American viewers might recall a dispute that President Abraham Lincoln had in 1863 with Supreme Justice Roger Taney, which was basically similar with one small thing. At the time, constitutionally, Lincoln was wrong and Taney was right, yet the decision of the court was not held. This is quite the same. We have a Knesset that is sovereign to make this decision. There is an appeal of people who do not care not only for the law but also for democracy itself, because the Knesset got the authority to make this decision from the people in elections that took part exactly 2 months ago. Yet the court took upon itself to deliberate whether or not the decision of the people is indeed legitimate. This is illegal and anti-democratic.
Now, court hearings are expected to continue in the coming days. What do you think that the outcome is going to be?
Well, the question that everybody is trying to guess is what indeed will be the outcome, but this is not a legal question. I myself, as a lawyer, can tell that the issue at hand is not legal whatsoever. It is purely political, and the Supreme Court acts on this matter as a political agent, not as a legal agent, because there is no legal question to be discussed. This is an agreement, the coalition agreement between 2 parties that are allowed to legislate. So once they are allowed to legislate, there is no way for the court to have a legal question to deliberate in. So there is no legal...
But is there still a chance that the unity deal could be invalidated?
yes, of course, there is a chance. Once again, the fact that the decision at hand is not legal does not mean that the court will not take this decision anyway. And it is quite reasonable to expect that the court will indeed make this decision and will void the agreement and force the Israeli people, after making a democratic decision just 2 months ago, to go again to election, because the decision that the Israeli public made does not seem appropriate to the 11 judges that currently sit on the bench.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us with this update. I guess we're going to have to wait and see what happens.
Thank you very much. We'll look forward.
All right. Now, this is some exciting news. A month-long trial has now ended at Israel's Sheba Medical Center, and the results are amazing. The Israeli startup Ora Air has successfully shown that its new filtration device can kill up to 99% of flu viruses in the air. And now they're setting their sights on the coronavirus. We all know that the coronavirus sticks around in the air for longer than initially thought. But how infectious is a virus as it floats around the room? And what's the best way to get rid of it? Well, Israeli startup Ora Air says it doesn't matter, as long as their filtration device is installed nearby. The filter has been installed at Sheba Medical Center as part of efforts to reduce contaminants before the coronavirus was discovered. And phase 1 of testing of the device is over, now that it's been proven that Ora Air is in fact 99% effective against the H1N1 and H5N1 flus. Meanwhile, in the US, Ora Air has also successfully finished 3 other pilots at a hotel, a conference room, and an apartment. So now phase 2 has begun at the Sheba Medical Center in Israel, in which Ora Air will focus on purifying and disinfecting the air from an expanded set of viruses, including, of course, COVID-19. And the device will be installed in labs used to diagnose the virus, medical staff rooms, relevant operating rooms, and patient rooms. Right now, Ora Air is in the final stages of receiving EU funding to expand its product's reach. The Sea of Galilee is at the highest level it's been in the last 2 decades, but not many people are around to see it. Tourism typically peaks in April when Christians flock to holy sites during the Easter season. But with the coronavirus pandemic, it looks like Tiberias won't be seeing any new faces anytime soon. Still, we can rejoice in how well the Sea of Galilee is doing. Here in Israel, it's called the Kinneret, and it provides Israel with 25% of the country's water. It's long been seen as a way to gauge Israel's health, and news outlets often post updates on the water levels. Well, the lake's level came to an all-time low in April of 2017 when the water dropped about 212 meters below sea level, but the current level is 208 meters below sea level, which may not sound like much of a difference, but it's huge for the vegetation and wildlife in the area. Now, we may not be seeing Israelis enjoying themselves on the shores of the Sea of the Galilee just yet, but tour groups are already making bookings for autumn and winter, so you may want to check that out. Now, if you thought that history was incapable of resurrection, think again, because the Israeli-based company MyHeritage has now invented an incredible technology that can automatically transform your black and white photos into color. Here to tell us all about it is the director of PR at MyHeritage, Rafi Mendelson. So the process looks like magic. How does it work, and what does it take to create this type of technology?
Well, it might look and feel like magic, but actually it's very simple. But the technology behind it is very complicated. It's a deep learning, machine learning that trains itself using millions of images. But for you and I and the users of MyHeritage, they upload their black and white images either from the past or from their family history scrapbooks, and in almost 1 or 2 seconds, it colorizes it, really bringing it to life. So
in terms of colorizing these images, how do you know that the coloring is right? Is that just kind of a guessing game?
Sure. Well, it's a highly intelligent version of that, and it has trained itself using those millions of images, and so it knows to recognize trees and chairs and dresses and different costumes and outfits through different points of history. And so it's a very intelligent algorithm that allows you to be able to colorize those images. And many of our users who have colorized it have said that either that they remember that moment and that's exactly what it looks like, or it gives them a kind of deeper appreciation and understanding with their ancestors through family history.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes you feel more relatable, you know, that you could have been there. You can imagine that scene when it lives in color. Now, where did this idea come from, and how long does it take to perform this process? Do you just put a photo up there immediately and it works within seconds, or do you have to wait?
Absolutely. So you just go to the myheritage.com/incolor and you upload your black and white image, and it takes a second to be able to colorize it. And we show your image, your black and white image, side by side to the newly colorized image. So you can be able to see it and play with it. And it's really amazing. We're seeing a fantastic reaction. The idea actually came about through a hackathon, an internal event that took place between different team members of MyHeritage. And one of the teams came up with this colorizing idea. MyHeritage is all about helping people make discoveries about their family history. Right. And they thought that users would be able to have a better appreciation. And this idea was actually the winning idea. We launched it a couple of months ago. Even within a few days, we had over 1 million images that were colorized by users all around the world. And they've continued to do so. And we did so recently for Yom Ha'atzmaut.
So if I have some family pictures that I want to upload, do I have to create an account with MyHeritage? How does this work?
Absolutely. So you can upload it 10 images for free, but many of our users who have a subscription can do as many of them as they want. Okay. But you can today just go on and upload your first 10 images at no cost whatsoever.
I wish my grandparents were still around to be able to show this to them, because I can imagine what an exciting experience it is to see those photos, you know, in the colors that you remember them in. But thank you so much for joining us. This is absolutely amazing. I'm definitely going to try this myself.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, now most high school age teens are worrying about prom or getting into the right college, but there are also others who choose slightly different paths. And ILTV's Nittany Manson is here to tell us about a high school dropout who actually made a feature film. Nittany, what have we been doing with our lives?
Nothing, apparently.
Apparently nothing.
No, but yeah, so a 19-year-old high school dropout, like you said, actually made a feature film about the Holocaust. So let's take a look at the trailer.
He had written Mein Kampf in 1924 and 25, told us what he was looking for, told us that he was looking for a world that was racially realigned. And in retrospect, what's clear is that Hitler meant what he said, and he said what he meant.
I love films about World War II and the Holocaust, so I know I'm going to want to see this.
Yeah,
so this boy, tell us about who he is, where he's from.
So the film, first of all, is called We Shall Not Die Now. The filmmaker, his name is Ashton Glickman. He's 19 years old.
No big deal.
No big deal at all.
Big deal.
He started working on this when he was 17. He spent a year putting together footage and then another year putting together the film. He's from Indiana.
Yeah. And does he have family that was in the Holocaust? Is that what inspired this?
He doesn't actually. No, he was learning about the Holocaust, and he was inspired to make this film. He said he doesn't have family that was involved, but he does have a great uncle that was part of the liberation.
Right. Well, that's, I mean, that's obviously a very exciting story, I'm sure, that he was hearing as he was growing up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, being so young, he started doing this at 17. Were people wary of him as a filmmaker, and how did he get that support?
He said a few different times that no, he didn't encounter any ageism. He was actually really happy with how open people were about talking to him about it.
Right.
Being like a 17-year-old coming to interview Holocaust survivors, you could imagine that people might not take him seriously, but they did, and they were totally open. He actually got help from the Holocaust museums, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum.
Wow, so he had a lot of assistance.
Yeah,
he interviewed dozens of Holocaust survivors in this film, right?
He did. He interviewed survivors, experts. He went to Poland for 2 weeks and filmed to get contemporary footage. He really went the extra mile here.
Absolutely. Well, that's, you know, it just, the redefinition of the type of education that you can get in high school, right? This is amazing. Yes. Cannot wait to see it again. It's called We Shall Not Die Now, and it's on Amazon Prime.
On Amazon Prime and on YouTube. The whole thing is on YouTube as well.
Perfect. All right, guys, we know what we're going to be doing later tonight. All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight you can expect a mostly clear sky and lows at around 58 Fahrenheit or 14 degrees Celsius. And then tomorrow will be partly cloudy, but with a rise in temperatures to an average high of 82 or 28 degrees Celsius. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel on tubing. Is he calling the coronavirus hotline? It's not clear. It's not clear. But that's the best video I've seen this week, and I appreciate our team for allowing us to enjoy that. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.51 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from from ILTV. Please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.